What is going on, guys? Welcome back. I put up on my community page, if you guys wanted to hear me talk about pro football instead of just video game football. And to my shock, 6,000 of you voted. 85% of you said yes. So here we go. I've got my good buddy, Uche Waniri, with me, and we're going to talk. I wanted to talk about the first topic, something that makes me happy, something that I look at and it gives me hope for professional football as a whole. And one of them right now is Kyler Murray, because he makes it look easy. He makes it look like he's having fun. And the interesting thing is we don't normally see what we're seeing here, the young quarterback with the wide receiver kind of entering his prime. We usually see it like Harrison and Manning, or maybe plug and play Tom Brady, Randy Moss. I guess you could say this is almost a Carson Palmer, Chad Johnson situation, but with these two guys, neither of them really seem to be motivated by being a star, and they simply want to be the best. And, I couldn't help but think watching the game yesterday, not too many times can people make Larry Fitzgerald an afterthought, but essentially that's what's happened with Murray and Hopkins in terms of what they're doing. How do you feel about that, Uche?
Well, I totally agree. I think that this is the birth of the next great dynamic duo, as far as we've seen, this season of with a quarterback and a wideout being on the same page, both playing at high levels, and it makes it much easier on the offensive coordinator, and it gives your offense a lot more versatility when you have such execution by those two guys, and it just creates another problem for the defense to have to focus on. So, really the situation is going to work to the benefit of many of the other players on the offense who are going to be able to now win in various scenarios, because a lot of attention is going to be on, Hopkins and Kyler Murray's ability outside of the pocket to stretch plays. It just adds another level of threat to this Arizona offense.
Yeah, and an offense that had a lot of question marks, obviously losing some key pieces, David Johnson being one of them. And I think when you see something like this happen, it really is, I don't want to say surprising, but it's refreshing because, as you mentioned, the future is really so bright. You've got a situation here where it seems like they could only do things to get better, and in being better would obviously be in a position where they could succeed even more as the chemistry kind of grows, as their ability to practice and take reps and get in-game speed. I feel like all they can do is continue to get better. And when you look at what they're already doing, there was a play the other day where he was smiling as Hopkins came open, and you see it and you're like, man, you don't see that all that often. He's looking downfield, he's seeing his man beat man on man, and he's smiling because he knows he's about to drop a touchdown pass in. And it really is something that should put fear in the hearts of every defense, but a smile on the face of every football fan, because we know these are the things that put the NFL in a great position to be successful, create amazing stories, and give us the probability to sit back and maybe watch some history books get rewritten a little bit. It doesn't seem like we always have those situations each year, but it seems like we could see it now.
Well, I mean, also, you just got to kind of think about the other side of this as well. The Houston Texans made all of this possible for the Arizona Cardinals when they traded away DeAndre Hopkins, who really would be living this experience potentially with Deshaun Watson right now in Houston had they not made that trade. But the fortune obviously is with Arizona right now, and it just shows how everything can come together with one precise move that puts you in position. And on the other end, when you don't make the right decisions, it can, be the first crack in the armor of a team that we expected to do very well. And now, they're heading straight into a rebuild. That's where, the importance of these franchise players can come into play for teams when they're trying to take it to the next level. Arizona's been planning this. They've been trying to find a way to put all the pieces together. And right now it's clicking for them. And they have their biggest win of the season against Seattle. So, it looks like the beginning of something beautiful in the NFL.
Yeah, it's one of those 2020 things, though, right? Like you look at this and you say, oh, yeah, Hopkins a great wide receiver. Why wouldn't you jump on this opportunity? But as you said, there's a double-edged sword here too. Houston felt like they were going to get something. Obviously, they haven't quite yet. And it is interesting because a lot of times you see these big name trades. Think back to Amari Cooper, goes over to Dallas. We don't always see this result, right? And I'm not saying Amari Cooper and DeAndre and Hopkins are in the same boat. They're most certainly not. But what I'm saying more so is that a lot of times you see kind of these bigger name trades. It's not a guarantee. There was a risk here from Arizona, but certainly you look at it now, and it's something where the risk seems very small given what the prospect of the reward could be.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was a move that Arizona would have never expected to fall into their lap. I don't think anybody really expected it to fall into their lap. But again, they've been putting the pieces in place. Their defense is playing great. Their offense is executing. They Kingsbury really has kind of architected a system and a culture that the Cardinals can believe in. They believed in it since he came in the door, and now you see with that buy-in, it's starting to pay dividends for everyone who's been putting in the work. And again, this is something that is potentially could be in place for the next decade. We all know that Kyler Murray is going to be the guy in Arizona for the foreseeable future, unless something unforeseen happens. But DeAndre Hopkins is validated. He's validated himself as one of if not the best receiver in the NFL. He went head to head with the best team in the NFL, and they defeated him. He was a big piece of that.
Yeah, and how do you not buy in? I mean, if you're a fan, if you're a teammate, when you look at what's happening, when you see the dynamic, when you look at the results, like you said, I mean, this is a massive win for them in a tough game that could have went either way, that went down to the wire, that really showed, is your heart really in it? Are you willing to play almost 5 quarters to win a game? A lot of players sometimes check out a little bit. They don't want that gut check. They want to have the easy win, and if it's not there.
It's pressure. It's about pressure. And this was the biggest test of his career, and that comes with the sizable amount of pressure and going out there performing. So, in order to go out there and actually be worth a damn, you have to be able to compose yourself. You have to be able to play in the moment. You have to be able to play fast, so you don't have to think. And all the things that you've worked on during the week, all the film study you've done, you rely on those instincts and those techniques that you've been taught, and that will carry you through the day. I mean, Murray went 34 for 48, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, 67 yards rushing, and he overcame a 10-point deficit. I mean, it was a coming out party to a certain extent for him. And, I think that anyone who's been looking at these, really, the NFC West has had a magnificent, NFC West has had a magnificent field to play over the course of the season. You've got two teams that are just going back and forth, as powerhouses in the NFL with the Cardinals and the Seahawks. And this was his coming out party in the head-to-head matchup. So he had a great game. And that's something that, for a young quarterback, maybe you don't expect it in something as high pressure as this.
It was interesting seeing him go against Russell Wilson directly like that, where a lot of people have Russell, tagged as the MVP early on. And you look at the two of them and you're like, wow, these two guys have a lot of similarities in terms of how they play, with the composure, with the lack of stress, with the really smart football. And, honestly, if you weren't an NFL fan, if you were just watching that game, I don't know that you would be able to sit there and say, okay, here's a guy that continually, goes for an MVP, is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Oh, and here's another guy. He's just a rookie. I really didn't see that level of separation between them like we normally would. They basically played as if they were on the same level, and that's what's so refreshing, because so rarely do we see something like that really come into fruition. It's normally, we expect them to lose that game. There's a setback, but it's okay because nobody expected them to be.
I mean, I don't know that I expected them to lose the game. I expected it to be a good game, because if people are paying attention to what's kind of trending in the NFL, Kyler Murray has been quietly on the rise. His arrows pointed up. Obviously they're not undefeated, but these guys have some quality wins under their belt. And this was a battle of two quarterbacks of similar, cut from the same cloth. These guys are similar in their style, they're similar in their operation, and they're similar in the respect they have from their teammates and the leadership qualities that they exhibit. People want to follow them. Players and their players on their teams, on both teams, want to follow that quarterback. So that brings out the best in their play. And you saw it yesterday in the game. How many big plays were made during that game? I mean, DK Metcalf pulled a Julio Jones, hustled 100 yards down the field to save a touchdown by Budda Baker. Budda Baker was running his ass off. He was trying to get there. He was trying to get there. He saw it. He felt it. He felt DK Metcalf coming for him. And by the time he looked behind him, he was getting tackled. That was the kind of effort that was exhibited by both sides in that game. That was a great game. And both teams played well enough to win. It's just that one of them couldn't. So, these are two teams that are gonna play each other again before the season's over, and they'll probably be playing each other in the postseason if this kind of play is what is to be expected from them every single week.
If 10 years ago I told you we'd be looking forward to Cardinals and Seahawks games, what would your response be?
Well, then we're going to be looking forward to Jaguars and Cleveland games soon after that, because it would have been a hard thing to maybe believe based on just the history of these teams before they got coaches like Kingsbury and what's his name up in Seattle.
I think what you're saying is it's a culture. It's a complete culture.
It's a culture thing. It's a culture thing. Yeah, Pete Carroll. That's what I was thinking of. Pete Carroll brought a new culture. He brought that culture he had at USC, and Cliff Kingsbury brought. I mean, that's a similar kind of culture, just a similar era some of that new era of coaching that we're seeing in the NFL, where it's more geared towards players and understanding how to properly manage, the workload and just be creative with the play calling. And we're seeing that type of thing play out here. Two very well coached teams.
Well, we appreciate you guys checking this out. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you want to have my or Uchi's opinion on other things in the NFL, let us know. We'll try to knock out a couple of these a week, and we will be back in the week with more coming.